Good morning, guys. Before we move on to chapter 17 and David and Goliath and all the other exciting stuff in the rest of David's life, there's one more thing I'd like to look at in 1 Samuel chapter 16. And it's a little bit from the text that we read yesterday. So reading from verse 19, 1 Samuel chapter 16, reading from verse 19, it says, Then Samuel sent messengers to Jesse and said, Send me your son David, who is with the sheep. So Jesse took a donkey loaded with bread and a skin of wine and a young goat and sent them with his son David to Saul. David came to Saul and entered his service. Saul liked him very much, and David became one of his armor bearers. Then Saul sent word to Jesse, saying, Allow David to remain in my service, for I am pleased with him. Whenever the Spirit from God came on Saul, David would take up his lyre, his guitar, and play. Then relief would come to Saul, and he would feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him. And so I'd like to have a quick look at the guy who doesn't really get much of a look in this story, and that's Jesse, David's dad. And he does two things in this story. So Saul sends him this message. So he sends David, his son, and he sends a donkey loaded with bread, a skin of wine, and a young goat. And I was thinking about this. There was nothing really in this for Jesse. In fact, Jesse lost three things here. It was all lost for Jesse. The first thing he lost was his bravest and his best shepherd. David, we read about later on, that he kills bears and lions. Like, this guy was like the terminator of the bad wildlife that was having a go at his sheep, at Jesse's sheep. So Jesse loses his best shepherd. Not only does he lose his best shepherd, but he loses one of his sons. His son's no longer at home with him. So David's no longer at home. And then thirdly, he loses a donkey. He loses a whole pile of bread, a skin of wine, and a young goat. And if you have a look just quickly how Saul addresses Jesse when he speaks to him, Saul says, Allow David to remain in my service, for I am pleased with him. And the way Saul is speaking to Jesse here is a command. It's not a request. He's not saying, would you mind? Jesse considered it an absolute privilege to serve King Saul. And so I'm asking us the question this morning. If Jesse responded like that to King Saul, who was just an earthly king and not a very good one at that, how do we respond to Jesus when he makes requests of us? Well, not so much requests, but when he makes commands of us. Because I think in today's society, one of the things I'm noticing more and more, there's this kind of this phrase which is called you do you. You know, and basically it's this narcissistic thing where it's like you be free to be whoever you want to be, and I'll be free to be whoever I want to be. But it's a little bit short-sighted, because the truth is, it all works until my freedoms step on your toes and your freedoms step on my toes. No one can truly all be you do you. I mean, case in point, this staycation we're on at the moment in our homes. We are doing this not only for our own sake, but we are laying down our own freedoms for the sake of other people at the moment. We are allowing other people's freedoms or care for others to impinge on our freedoms right now. And so this you do you thing doesn't really work, but it's pervasive in culture. God has no place for that you do you culture. It's funny, and I think what's happened is, over church history, churches don't really trust that people are hearing God. So what they do is the church starts to institute these rules and laws on people, and tries to guilt people into a certain type of behavior. And so the church gets into legalism. And when the church is operating like it should, where it says, hey, you know what? You follow Jesus. You follow Jesus and hear what he says to you. That's not the same as saying you do you. That's not the same as giving us a whole bunch of freedom to just carry on like a bunch, whatever we feel like. In fact, it's probably more freedom, because we're saying you have freedom to follow Jesus, who knows you intimately, who knows every aspect of your life. He's planned your life. He's thought about who you are, and he knows what's best for you. But like we heard from Spider-Man, with great, I think it was with great power with Spider-Man, but with great freedom comes great responsibility. And so God comes to us sometimes, and sometimes he's going to ask us for something that's precious to us, like our best shepherd. Maybe he might ask us for someone at Center Church. We've sown people all over the world, and we have to have our hands open. Maybe sometimes God will ask us for someone really close to us, something really close to us, like a son or a daughter, and to be involved in something, or for our family to do something that's a little bit out the box. For us, God spoke to us 4 years ago about leaving the place we were in, packing up our family and planting a church here in Johannesburg, and that included our kids. And we have a choice whether we see that as a request or a command. And I love the fact that Jesse also sent the donkey, the bread, the wine, and the young goat. Because sometimes God asks for little things. Sometimes he's like, hey man, how about a loaf of bread for that person? Hey John, how about buying that guy something? How about just blessing somebody else? And there's smaller things than these huge destiny things, the goats and the bread and whatever. But there's still, God chooses and he presumes to command us at every level in our lives. And so the two greatest commands, Jesus was asked, when he was asked what are the two greatest commands, he said this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like the first: love your neighbor as yourself. And friends, over this time, as we are at home, in our staycation, and we're loving others by staying home and being as faithful as we can, obedient to our government, and can I encourage you to spend time and love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. It's not a suggestion, it's a command from God. Take this time to work your relationship out with him. And secondly, love your neighbor as yourself. Love your wife if you're married. Love your kids if you've got kids. If you are staycationing at home, love your friends over WhatsApp or over video or whatever, over Zoom. But love your neighbor as yourself. And let's move away from a place of seeing God as someone who makes requests of us, and see Jesus as the King that he truly is, who commands us as the King of the army as we walk and we ride forward into our future together with him.